Today, I left the Navy. Not with applause, not with a flag folded in my hands, or a room full of clapping peers. Just silence and mockery. Commander Rickson didn't even look up from his coffee when he signed the discharge papers. He muttered something about finally clearing out the dead weight, loud enough for the younger officers to hear. One of them snorted. The rest stayed quiet, eyes locked on screens or boots, pretending not to notice. I stood there for a second, longer than I should have, holding that thin white envelope like it still meant something. 10 years of service. Missions no one talked about. Promotions earned but never celebrated. I never expected a parade, but the coldness still cut deeper than I was ready for. They thought they knew who I was. Just another transfer, another burnout shuffled into base support. The quiet woman who never spoke up at the mess and always took night shifts no one wanted. No one here knew my name, which used to carry weight in a different theater. And that was fine. That was the deal. I signed papers most people never see, and lived through years most people never hear about. But standing in that office, with Rickson's voice echoing in my ears, and my career boiled down to a few sarcastic words, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. Not just at him. At myself for letting it get this far. I walked out without saying a word. The air outside felt too bright, too still. I tightened my grip on the envelope and started down the path to the gate, boots loud against the pavement. They thought my story ended here. But they didn't know the half of it, not yet. The months after my last deployment felt like purgatory. I was stationed at the Navy base in San Diego, but I may as well have been invisible. My name wasn't on any real ops roster. I wasn't invited to meetings that mattered. I spent most days handling outdated equipment logs and monitoring a comms room nobody ever used. Rickson had called me useless backup in my second week. It wasn't said to my face. He muttered it to a group of officers when I walked past, like I was already part of the wallpaper. I pretended I didn't hear it, but I carried those words around like a weight. He made it easy for everyone else to treat me the same way. The newer guys never asked where I'd come from. They assumed I was just someone who didn't make the cut, washed out, reassigned. One morning, a junior lieutenant asked if I'd ever seen action. He didn't wait for an answer. His friend cracked a joke about me being the piano teacher of the platoon. I laughed it off because that was safer than the truth. I could have named cities where I'd fought and bled, listed medals I never displayed, but none of it would have mattered here. I wasn't one of them. Not anymore. In the break room, my mug always ended up at the back of the cabinet. In formation, no one looked my way. During drills, I was given grunt tasks, like moving gear or refueling trucks. The silence was loudest in the locker room when conversations paused the moment I walked in. Then they'd resume, slightly quieter, like I might report them for breathing. But I didn't say a word. I kept my head down, logged my hours, showed up early, and left late. I played their game and waited for the clock to run out. It's strange how you can survive war zones, sleep in deserts, fight through jungle heat, and yet feel the most abandoned on a sunny base, just a few miles from the beach. I told myself it was temporary. That silence was a shield. But some days, the way they ignored me felt more brutal than gunfire. I wanted to scream, not because I needed their approval, but because I had become a ghost in a place I used to belong to. A phantom in uniform, reduced to paperwork and protocol. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't make noise. This was mine. The porch creaked under my boots, just like it used to when I was 16, sneaking in late. Nothing had changed. Not the chipped paint on the railing, not the hummingbird wind chime above the door. The air still smelled like jasmine and dust. I hadn't been home in over 2 years, but everything felt like it had waited for me. I wasn't there to visit. I needed air. Space. Something outside the base. My mother had passed 3 months earlier, and I hadn't even attended the funeral. Deployment didn't allow for grief. So I came now, hoping to feel her, or at least feel something. Inside, the house was quiet. I made my way to the attic without thinking, like muscle memory, pulling me up the steps. That's where I found the box, a small, rusted tin tucked behind a row of old board games and blankets that still smelled like her. I almost didn't open it, but my name was written across the top in her slanted handwriting. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, and a navy blue folder with a seal embossed on the front. I froze. I hadn't seen that kind of folder in years. I opened the envelope first. Her letter was short, just a few lines in her voice. She wrote that she'd always known, even if I never told her, that she was proud of me, not just for what I did, but for who I became. She said she kept the folder in case I ever forgot who I was. My throat tightened. I hadn't cried in years, not even at her service. But now, sitting on the attic floor with sunlight streaking through dusty slats, I felt my heart break open. The folder held official verification of my rank and years served in SEAL team missions. It listed operations I'd lived through but never acknowledged. My name was printed in black ink, next to words like Lieutenant Commander and Confidential Deployment Record. She had known. She had kept this part of me safe when I couldn't. I thought I'd buried that version of myself, left it behind with my gear and classified past. But my mother never forgot. Even in silence, she had protected the truth. And now, in this old house with its soft walls and ghost-filled rooms, she gave it back to me. That was the moment I realized I didn't have to earn respect through someone else's approval. I had already done enough. I was enough. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt seen. The sun was barely up when we hit the field. Sweat already clung to my skin, and my boots sank slightly into the damp earth with every step. It was my last training rotation, but no one treated it like anything worth noticing. I blended in, same uniform, same drills, same silence. We were halfway through a weighted sprint set when Rickson called out across the field. "Vargas, careful with that run. Wouldn't want our yoga instructor pulling a hamstring." A few of the younger guys chuckled, unsure if they were supposed to laugh. He didn't stop. I mean, what's next? Teaching mindfulness between burpees? My jaw clenched. I didn't stop running. I didn't roll my eyes or bite back. I kept my pace steady, focusing on the burn in my legs instead of the burn in my chest. Every word he said echoed behind me like gravel crunching under boots. I could feel the smirks, the stolen glances, the silence from those who wouldn't speak up. Later, during cool-down stretches, Rickson wandered by again. "You should stick to the stretching drills, Vargas. Leave the heavy stuff to the ones still in the fight." His voice was casual, almost bored. But each word hit sharply. Like he wasn't just trying to cut me down, he was trying to erase me. I nodded like it didn't matter, like it didn't sting to be reduced to a punchline in a uniform I had bled in. My hands stayed steady on the mat, even though my breath came tight and shallow. I looked past him, out toward the far fence line, and let him finish his show. Let them all finish. I'd been through worse in silence, and they had no idea who they were really mocking. Not yet. I handed the envelope across his desk without a word. Rickson didn't even glance at the paperwork before leaning back in his chair, a smirk playing on his face like he'd just watched a losing hand fold. "Well," he said, dragging the word out, "I guess it's time you found a real job. Maybe open a yoga studio. Something peaceful." He laughed at his own joke, loud and open like he expected me to crack or argue or cry. I didn't. I just looked him in the eye, long enough for the smile to falter, ever so slightly. Then I turned and walked out. Not fast, not slow. Just steady. One foot after the other, out through the hallway where photos of decorated soldiers lined the walls. None of them looked like me. Outside, the air hit sharper than usual. The wind off the coast carried salt and silence. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. There was no one worth saying it to. My boots made a clean rhythm on the pavement, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times but now felt final. I didn't look back. Not at the gate. Not at the flag. Not at the office behind me. Rickson could laugh all he wanted. He could pretend this was the end of my story. Let him. Let them all. I was done giving pieces of myself to people who never saw the whole. This wasn't a defeat. It was released. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The call came just after sunrise. I almost didn't answer. The number wasn't saved, and I was mid-step on the back porch, coffee in one hand, the morning quiet around me like a blanket. But something in me said to pick up. The voice on the other end was calm, crisp. "Lieutenant Commander Vargas, this is Admiral Karen Tate." I froze. No one had used that title in over a year. Not even me. She didn't waste time. "I'd like you to come to Norfolk. Bring your Department of Defense file. There's something we need to discuss in person." Her tone gave nothing away, but it wasn't a request. I said yes before I had time to ask why. The line went dead, but the tension stayed. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear long after she'd hung up, heart racing in a way that felt old and familiar. I had buried that file in the bottom drawer of my mother's desk, next to old tax records and broken pens. Now it suddenly felt like a lifeline, or a fuse about to be lit. Packing was easy. I didn't have much anymore, but my mind was loud. Norfolk meant questions. It meant exposure. It meant stepping back into a world I thought I'd sealed shut. But someone like Admiral Tate didn't call for no reason. Someone had seen me. Really seen me. And even though part of me was scared, the other part, the part that used to lead men into the dark, was ready. The command room was colder than I remembered. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were bare, except for a single clock ticking too loudly. I sat across from Admiral Tate, my file unopened between us, my pulse steady but loud in my ears. She flipped the folder open with quiet precision. "Lieutenant Commander Alana Vargas," she began. 10 years active duty, Navy SEAL. 7 deployments. Multiple classified missions under Joint Task Force Command." She didn't raise her voice, but each line hit with weight. Rickson sat 2 seats down. He hadn't said a word since I walked in. Now he leaned back, arms crossed, trying to look bored, but his eyes tracked every page. Tate continued. 3 high-risk hostage recoveries. 1 counter-terror operation in Aleppo. A field citation for valor. Medal of Valor nomination, refused by the recipient. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. "You didn't want attention." "Not then, not now." I said nothing. My silence was the only shield I still carried. She turned another page. "All deployments verified by Defense Intelligence. All classified until now." She paused before setting the folder flat on the table. "Today, by special order, this record is declassified in full." The room went still. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rickson blinked, his mouth twitching like he might speak. But nothing came out. No sarcasm. No laughter. Just a flicker of recognition. He hadn't shown me in years. The others in the room looked at each other, confused, then back at me. They didn't know what to say, and I didn't need them to. The silence was full, not awkward, not hollow, just full of everything I had done, everything I had carried, everything they had mocked without knowing. The truth sat on the table now, heavy, unshakable, and for once, no one dared look away. The stage was small, just a fold-out platform on the front lawn of my old high school, with a mic stand wobbling slightly in the breeze. Rows of folding chairs stretched out in front of me, filled with faces I hadn't seen in years. Some had once whispered behind my back. Others had laughed. Now they sat in silence, waiting to hear what I had to say. I cleared my throat and looked down at the paper in my hands. I didn't need it. The words had been building in me for a decade. I looked up. I spent 10 years in the Navy SEALs. Most of it under a name I couldn't share, and in missions I couldn't talk about. And when I came home, I didn't come back to parades or banners. I came back to silence. There were no gasps, just stillness. I didn't correct the rumors. I didn't defend myself. Not because I was ashamed, but because the work I did came with a different kind of pride. One that doesn't need applause. A few heads nodded. I kept going. But I've learned that silence, when carried too long, becomes weight. And today, I'm letting that weight go. I stepped aside and revealed a small plaque covered by a navy blue cloth. The Vargas Valor Scholarship is for the children of veterans, kids whose lives are shaped by service they didn't choose but still carry. My voice caught for a second, but I pushed through. It's not just about tuition. It's about recognition, about knowing they're seen, even when their parents were not. When I pulled the cloth back, the seal gleamed gold in the sunlight. The crowd stood. Some clapped. Some wiped their eyes. But I wasn't watching for that. I wasn't looking for them to make up for the past. This wasn't about being proven right. It was about planting something that would grow long after I was gone. Afterward, people came up, one by one. Neighbors. Veterans. A few of the same officers who used to look through me like I wasn't there. They shook my hand. Said they were sorry. Said they didn't know. I nodded and thanked them. But inside, I already knew none of that mattered now. What mattered was the girl in the second row wearing her dad's service cap, the one who asked if SEALs could be women too. I bent down and told her, yes, and strong ones. She smiled like it was the best thing she'd heard all day. And maybe it was. That night, I sat alone on my porch again. The wind moved through the trees. No noise. No headlines. Just peace. My story wasn't hidden anymore. It wasn't loud either, but it was mine. And now, it had a place to live that wasn't a file drawer or whispered memory. It had a name, a legacy. And for once, I didn't need anyone else to believe in it. I already did. The porch light hummed above me, casting a soft circle over the old wooden boards. I sat in my mother's chair, the one with the faded cushion and the armrest worn smooth from years of her hands. In my lap, the Medal of Valor rested beside her letter, both of them heavier than they looked. The night air was cool, still carrying the warmth of the day. Somewhere down the road, crickets sang like they always had, steady and unchanging. I could hear the low rumble of my father's truck pass by, slow and quiet this time. He didn't stop, and I didn't stand. That part of the story was over now. I unfolded the letter again. Her handwriting was shaky but strong. She hadn't written much, just enough to say she was proud, that she knew what I carried and why I never spoke of it, that she never needed anyone else to understand, because she always had. I pressed the medal into my palm and stared out across the yard where we used to plant wildflowers. My life had been written in shadows for so long that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to stand in light. But this house, this porch, this quiet, it brought me back to the roots I tried to bury. Being a SEAL had shaped me, no doubt, but it didn't make me who I was. That strength, that silence, that fierce kind of love that says nothing, but never leaves, that came from her, from the woman who never raised her voice but always held the line. I wasn't made strong by training. I was born strong. Because of her.